Today we're going to be looking at the lock on bulk load option in sys tables. So we're going to be looking at this table named health checks. And what we are going to do, as you can see in the first query here, is we are going to check on that lock on bulk load option, and that is 0. And so what we are going to do is we are going to execute the stored procedure. This is SP table option. This is, of course, an MS shipped stored procedure. And we are going to select, first of all, the table name. We're going to select the option, and then we're going to put in the value here, which is 1. This is going to enable it. And we see in the second query, when we check again on the table name and the lock on bulk load option, we see that it is turned on for that table. And then, of course, I'm going to turn it back off because I want that back off. But I do want to show, of course, you would select 0 in this case, and you would turn it back off on lock on bulk load. So we can see that we can turn on the option to lock a table on bulk load. Now, especially for students in the ETL course and just in general, there are going to be situations in which when you're loading data, you do not want queries because when the queries are being run, you want the most accurate data possible. Likewise, there may be periods in which reports should not be running when it comes to loading data. I'll give you a really great example of this from my experience just in a situation in which it was not really an ETL context what it was supposed to be, but it was being used as an ETL context. But we would reload a reporting data that was looking at the metadata of a process that was running. And what I observed was that people were constantly running queries during the time that it was reporting information. And for, as many of you know, when it comes to bulk loads, let's suppose you have 1,000 tables that need to be loaded, and it's going in order of those tables. Maybe it's doing like 8 tables at a time. Well, they would sit there and they would say, oh my gosh, there's a couple of these tables that, haven't been filled with data. Therefore, there's all this missing data. Well, no, it just hasn't gotten to those tables yet. And so it was one of those things where, now what I did in that case is I locked all of the transactions out while it was going through. So I locked all of the tables when the transaction started. But if we had fewer tables, we could just like lock on bulk load. I don't want people to be checking on a table as, let's say, it's loading maybe 1 billion records, because they may check when it's 1 million, but it's like, guys, it has a lot more to go. And they were constantly emailing like, oh my gosh, the tables, it doesn't match, it doesn't meet the data requirements, we're not where we need to be. And that's because it's currently loading, and y'all are running 7 queries at a minute on these tables when it's in that process. And so it was one of those examples of a data team who were actually very unfamiliar with what they were doing, and they were constantly querying data during loads, and then they were claiming that there was a crisis and calling the DBAs to fix the problem. And there's no problem, guys. This is exactly how it's supposed to be. As we get data, it's going to transmit data. And so this is a great example of if you're using, let's say, bulk loads. Now in that case, because there were over 1,000 tables involved, I had to actually do it on a transaction level and just block everyone intentionally. But if I was, let's say, just loading 2 tables and they were really large loads, yeah, I would select this option to prevent them from accessing it, because I don't want to receive emails saying that there's a problem when the table is being loaded with data that's not an actual problem. Hopefully y'all never run into that situation, but if you do, this is an option you might be able to use in that situation. The other thing as well is if you see, let's say, a degradation in performance because people are querying while you're trying to load, you might also do it as well. It depends on the importance and the priority. Some people, it's not that big of a deal, and so they may not view it that way. But this is definitely one of the ways in which you can unlock a table on a bulk load. There's a transactional way, of course, and depending on the context, it might be appropriate in your situation.